Isabella Carter had always felt like she existed on the periphery of life's grand stage. At 28, she possessed a quiet beauty, soft brown eyes, delicate features, and a warm smile that could brighten any room. Yet, despite her kindness and intelligence, she was often dismissed and mocked. Her modest background, the simple way she dressed, and her unassuming demeanor made her an easy target for those who thrived on social superiority. In a world obsessed with wealth and appearances, Isabella had learned early to brace herself for judgment. Her workdays were a constant test of patience. At the marketing firm where she had spent the last 5 years, colleagues whispered behind her back, making subtle jokes about her thriftiness or her old-fashioned tastes. She had grown adept at smiling politely, absorbing the stings of their comments without revealing the frustration or sadness they sometimes triggered. Even when her ideas were creative or solutions effective, they were often overlooked in favor of flashier presentations from more socially polished co-workers. Yet Isabella refused to let their condescension define her. Her mind was sharp, her ideas thoughtful, and her heart compassionate, qualities that, though unnoticed by many, gave her a quiet strength. Social gatherings were another battleground. Invitations to galas, charity events, and exclusive parties often came with a mix of excitement and dread. She longed to be included, to be recognized, but too often found herself ignored or the subject of whispered amusement. At last month's office gala, she had worn a simple navy gown, chosen for elegance rather than extravagance. As she entered the room, a few colleagues exchanged amused glances, and someone muttered, "Looks like she's out of her element." Isabella had felt the familiar pang of embarrassment, yet she held her head high, navigating the crowd with as much grace as she could muster. Despite their laughter, she refused to shrink into invisibility. Isabella's resilience wasn't just outward, it was deeply rooted in her inner world. She read voraciously, cultivated skills beyond her job, and volunteered at the local community center, offering her time to causes she believed in. Her compassion was genuine. She had a natural inclination to help others, even when it went unnoticed or unappreciated. She had learned to find satisfaction in her own achievements, in the knowledge that her value was not dictated by societal mockery or shallow praise. Even in isolation, she carried a quiet dignity that others could neither take away nor diminish. Yet beneath her composed exterior, Isabella nurtured dreams that went beyond personal growth and quiet fulfillment. She longed for love, not the fleeting kind, but someone who would truly see her, who would recognize her worth and cherish her for who she was. She imagined conversations with someone who admired her mind as much as her heart, someone who could understand her struggles and celebrate her victories. It was a subtle, persistent hope, a fragile flame that she protected fiercely from cynicism. On mornings when she looked into the mirror, smoothing a strand of hair behind her ear, she would whisper to herself, "One day, someone will see me." It was a small act of courage, an affirmation against years of underestimation and ridicule. In her heart, she believed that her life was more than the scorn she endured, that her worth would someday be recognized, and that the quiet strength she carried would shine for someone truly deserving. Though the world often laughed at her, Isabella Carter was more than the sum of their mockery. She was intelligence, kindness, and resilience personified, waiting for the moment when someone powerful enough to see beyond appearances would finally notice her. It arrived one quiet afternoon, slipped beneath Isabella Carter's office door with an understated elegance that immediately caught her attention. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy, and stamped with gold lettering, the annual Whitman Charity Gala. Her heart skipped a beat as she held it in her hands, the tactile weight of the invitation somehow matching the gravity she felt in her chest. This was no ordinary social event, it was a gathering of the city's most influential, the elite who determined trends, partnerships, and social standing. And she, Isabella Carter, had been invited. She carefully removed the delicate card, reading the scripted lines over and over. Her name was written in flowing calligraphy, addressed personally to her. The thought was almost surreal. Isabella had spent her life on the outskirts of such circles, often laughed at or dismissed. Why would they invite her, someone so plainly ordinary, someone who wore modest dresses to blend in and kept her ambitions quietly ambitious? Anxiety rose swiftly, curling through her chest like icy fingers. What if she went and everyone laughed? What if she stumbled over her words, or worse, appeared laughably out of place? Her mind conjured every possible scenario, the whispers behind her back, the pointed glances, the sly smirks that had so often accompanied her presence in the past. She felt the familiar pang of self-doubt that usually kept her from reaching beyond her comfort zone. Yet alongside the fear was an unmistakable flicker of curiosity. She had always admired the charity and its impact, even from a distance. And the invitation, though intimidating, represented a chance to step into a world she had only observed from afar. She imagined the crystal chandeliers, the polished marble floors, the elegantly dressed guests, and for the briefest moment, she allowed herself to dream that she could belong, even if only for one night. It was then that Alexander Whitman entered her thoughts. Alexander, the richest man in the city, a figure whose presence seemed to dominate every social gathering he attended. A man whose reputation preceded him, powerful, sophisticated, and notoriously discerning. To many, he was untouchable, the kind of man whose approval or attention could elevate someone instantly. Isabella felt a strange mix of fear and intrigue at the thought of being in the same room as him. What would he think of her? Would he notice her at all, or would she remain invisible like she so often did in other settings? She paced slowly around her small apartment, card in hand. Thoughts collided in rapid succession. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'll embarrass myself. But what if this is an opportunity one can't ignore? Her rational mind battled with her emotional one. She thought of her dreams of recognition, of finding someone who would see her true worth, not just her appearance, her social standing, or her background. This gala could be that moment. It could be a step toward something greater, a small but significant challenge to her own fears. Hours passed as she debated, weighing every potential outcome with careful scrutiny. She imagined the doors opening, the crowd staring, the judgment she feared, but she also pictured the chance to engage, to speak with people she had once thought unreachable, and perhaps, just perhaps, to encounter Alexander Whitman himself in conversation. The idea thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. Finally, Isabella made her decision. She would go. Not because she expected everyone to welcome her with open arms, nor because she sought validation from the city's elite. She would go because she owed it to herself to face her fears, to step beyond the invisible walls she had built around her life. To stand among the glittering lights, to meet those who doubted her, and to show, not with words, but with presence, what she was truly capable of. As she tucked the invitation carefully into her purse, her heart began to steady. Determination replaced hesitation, and the thrill of possibility surged within her. For the first time in a long time, Isabella Carter allowed herself to believe that this night could be different, that the laughter and mockery of the past did not have to define her future. And perhaps, in the midst of that glittering crowd, she might finally be seen for who she truly was. The evening of the gala arrived with a quiet, anticipatory hum. Isabella Carter stood before her small bedroom mirror, the cream-colored envelope of the invitation now resting on her dresser like a talisman of possibility. Her usual modest attire, a simple blouse and skirt she wore to the office, lay folded neatly beside an array of gowns she had considered for tonight. Her fingers hovered over a soft navy dress, elegant yet understated, chosen to transform her presence without drawing mockery or unwanted attention. As she slipped into the gown, she felt a curious mixture of excitement and anxiety. The fabric fell gracefully around her, soft yet structured, accentuating her natural poise. A delicate necklace caught the light near her collarbone, and she brushed a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, revealing the faint, confident curve of her smile. The reflection in the mirror was someone both familiar and new, a woman stepping into a space she had often feared, yet determined to inhabit it fully. Isabella's heart raced as she thought of the gala ahead. She imagined the glittering chandeliers, the polished marble floors, the elite guests in sparkling attire. Excitement battled with fear. What if she stumbled? What if someone whispered cruelly behind her back? What if her appearance drew mockery instead of admiration? But alongside the anxiety was a burgeoning sense of hope. Tonight was more than a social event, it was a chance to be recognized for who she truly was, to allow herself to exist unapologetically in a world that often overlooked people like her. Flashbacks flitted across her mind, bittersweet and vivid. She remembered high school dances where classmates had laughed at her simple dress, office meetings where ideas were dismissed in favor of louder voices, and social gatherings where she had quietly stood on the sidelines while others basked in attention. Each memory had once wounded her deeply, a reminder of invisibility and scorn. Yet tonight, those same memories became a source of quiet resilience, a contrast that sharpened her determination to carry herself with dignity and grace. The girl who had endured laughter and ridicule was now standing tall, ready to claim a moment that had once seemed impossible. Downstairs, preparations were underway in a very different world. Alexander Whitman, the richest man in the city, was meticulously reviewing the gala arrangements in his private study. He was powerful, composed, and undeniably magnetic, a man whose presence could command a room without a word. Dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, he adjusted his cufflinks and glanced at the time, aware that tonight's event would be both social and strategic. Unaware of Isabella's impending presence, he moved with the precision of someone accustomed to being in control, yet there was an undercurrent of curiosity in his thoughts. Alexander had attended countless galas, seen innumerable beautiful women, and yet he wondered which presence tonight might truly captivate him. Back in her room, Isabella continued her transformation with careful attention to detail. Soft curls framed her face, enhancing the warmth in her brown eyes, while a hint of blush and natural lipstick completed the understated elegance she had chosen. Every gesture, every adjustment, was deliberate, a silent statement that she belonged in this world, even if for the first time. As she fastened the final clasp on her gown, she took a slow, steadying breath, feeling both anticipation and exhilaration course through her veins. The contrast between her quiet preparation and Alexander's composed readiness in his world of wealth and influence set the stage for the evening's encounter. Two lives, worlds apart yet destined to intersect, were each poised on the cusp of transformation. Isabella, once hesitant and unsure, now radiated confidence and charm. Alexander, ever powerful and composed, remained unaware of the spark about to enter his meticulously curated world. Isabella lingered for a moment in the mirror, studying the reflection of the woman she had become. She was still the kind-hearted, intelligent woman who had endured years of mockery, but now she carried a new aura of elegance and strength. The gala awaited, filled with uncertainty, scrutiny, and the possibility of recognition, and for the first time, Isabella Carter felt truly ready to face it. The grand doors of the Whitman estate opened to reveal a world Isabella Carter had only ever imagined in fleeting, daydream-like glimpses. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen constellations, their light refracting across polished marble floors and golden accents, creating a kaleidoscope of brilliance. Soft music flowed from a live orchestra tucked elegantly near the grand staircase, blending classical sophistication with an undercurrent of anticipation. Guests, dressed in glittering gowns and tailored tuxedos, mingled with carefully measured smiles, their laughter and conversation forming a subtle hum of privilege and power. Isabella paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath. Her fingers brushed the fabric of her navy gown, its soft drape comforting against her skin. She felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, the old voice of self-doubt whispering that she did not belong here, that her modest background would betray her among these elite socialites. Yet she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and stepped into the light. Her every movement was careful yet graceful, her poise a quiet declaration that she intended to navigate this unfamiliar terrain with dignity. Almost immediately, she felt the eyes of the room upon her. Some glanced curiously, while others whispered to one another, barely concealing smirks. A few of the elite attendees exchanged thinly veiled laughter, assuming her simplicity rendered her awkward or unworthy of notice. "Who's she?" a young socialite murmured to her companion, her tone dripping with amusement. "I didn't expect anyone like her to show up here." Another raised an eyebrow, scrutinizing Isabella's understated elegance as if testing her for hidden flaws. Isabella's heartbeat quickened, a delicate tension settling in her chest, but she refused to falter. With each step forward, she moved with subtle confidence, her gaze steady, her smile polite yet genuine. She greeted a few passing guests with quiet grace, nodding or offering a measured word, demonstrating composure that belied her nerves. Slowly, the murmurs began to shift. Some of the onlookers, initially ready to mock, now exchanged subtle glances of surprise, noticing the intelligence and warmth reflected in her eyes. She was not merely a modest woman in a room of opulence, she was a presence that quietly demanded recognition, a striking contrast to the artificiality around her. In a shadowed corner near the grand staircase, Alexander Whitman observed her without drawing attention. Tall, impeccably dressed, and always exuding authority, he had attended countless events like this one. Wealth and influence surrounded him effortlessly, yet something about Isabella's entrance caught his attention. She moved differently than the others, not seeking approval but emanating a quiet authenticity that distinguished her from the carefully curated social masks of the elite. He studied her discreetly, noting the natural elegance in her posture, the thoughtful grace in her gestures, and the subtle confidence that shone through her initial hesitancy. Alexander's curiosity deepened with each passing moment. He had seen women who dazzled with flash and spectacle, yet Isabella radiated something far more compelling: substance beneath simplicity, poise beneath vulnerability. He observed her interactions, noticing how she acknowledged others with genuine interest rather than calculated charm, how her eyes sparkled with intelligence rather than pretense. A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at his lips. For the first time in many such gatherings, he found himself intrigued by a presence that required no embellishment to captivate attention. Meanwhile, Isabella continued to navigate the ballroom, her nerves slowly giving way to awareness and poise. She caught snippets of conversations, delicate glances from some attendees, and the occasional raised brow, yet she held her composure. Every step, every measured greeting, was a quiet assertion of self-worth. Though the weight of judgment lingered in the air, she refused to let it define her evening. The whispers that had once felt like daggers now seemed faint, almost inconsequential against the growing sense of confidence building within her. The tension in the room shifted imperceptibly as Isabella moved through the crowd. Where mockery had initially greeted her, curiosity and admiration began to surface, subtle but undeniable. Alexander remained in his corner, watching silently, analyzing, and absorbing the scene. The ballroom, with all its glitter and grandeur, had provided a stage, but Isabella's presence, genuine and unforced, was becoming the unspoken focal point. The night was young, and yet a silent narrative had begun, the story of a modest woman stepping boldly into a world that had never expected her to belong, and the richest man in the room quietly taking notice. Isabella's heartbeat steadied as she glanced toward the far side of the ballroom, sensing eyes upon her but not fully aware of by whom. Somewhere in the midst of this glittering crowd, Alexander observed with quiet intrigue, foreshadowing the connection that would soon reshape the night and their lives alike. For the first time that evening, Isabella Carter felt the intoxicating mixture of anxiety and empowerment, the delicate thrill of stepping beyond her fears and into her own unfolding story. Chapter 5: Unexpected Encounters, Approx. 800 words. The orchestra's soft strains filled the air as Isabella Carter moved gracefully among the glittering crowd, navigating the gala with careful composure. Her earlier nerves had gradually given way to an emerging confidence, each step through the marble-floored ballroom reinforcing her presence. She greeted influential guests with quiet poise, offering measured smiles and thoughtful conversation that hinted at intelligence and charm beyond mere appearance. Those who had initially dismissed her as an outsider now paused, curiosity piqued by the subtle charisma she exuded. A distinguished philanthropist approached her first, engaging Isabella in polite conversation about a recent community initiative. She spoke confidently yet with warmth, demonstrating not only her understanding of the topic but also her ability to contribute meaningful ideas. Her remarks were insightful, concise, and delivered with a calm elegance that drew approving nods. As they spoke, Isabella noticed eyes turning toward her, once skeptical, now reflective of intrigue. The whispers and smirks she had expected slowly faded, replaced by a quiet recognition that this modest woman carried substance, intellect, and grace in equal measure. It was in this moment that Alexander Whitman made his subtle approach. Across the room, he had observed Isabella with an analytical curiosity, drawn to her authenticity amid the polished facades of high society. Now, moving with effortless precision, he closed the distance, arriving beside her with a courteous smile that conveyed interest without intrusion. "I've heard remarkable things about your work," he began, his voice low and controlled, yet imbued with genuine intrigue. "And I must say, you carry yourself with a confidence that is rare in these circles." Isabella felt a subtle flush of awareness, her pulse quickening as their brief interaction unfolded. She responded with measured grace, careful not to overplay her excitement, yet unable to hide the flicker of pleasure at his attention. Their conversation, though brief, was layered with curiosity and mutual respect. Alexander asked pointed yet considerate questions, eliciting thoughtful answers that revealed Isabella's intellect and sincerity. In turn, Isabella sensed a keen intelligence beneath his composed exterior, a sharp awareness that mirrored her own careful observations. Each exchange, though casual in tone, was charged with a subtle tension, a meeting of minds that hinted at the deeper connection that was beginning to form. Just as she was gaining confidence, a new challenge arrived in the form of a snobbish socialite. A tall woman in a sequined gown, dripping with ostentation, approached Isabella with a condescending smile. "I must admit," the woman began, her tone syrupy with feigned charm, "I wasn't expecting someone like you to attend tonight. It must be thrilling to step so far beyond your usual surroundings." The remark carried a clear undertone of ridicule, meant to unsettle Isabella and elicit laughter from nearby observers. Isabella's initial reaction was a flicker of tension, a reminder of all the times she had been underestimated and mocked. But instead of faltering, she allowed herself a slow, steadying breath. Her smile remained calm and unflustered. "It is indeed a new experience," she replied smoothly, her voice composed and warm. "And I find that the company I keep often surprises me as much as it seems to surprise others." Her words were measured, confident, and slightly wry, leaving the snobbish guest momentarily speechless. Observers nearby exchanged glances, impressed by Isabella's ability to maintain grace under scrutiny. Even Alexander, watching from a short distance, allowed himself a faint smile at her composed handling of the situation. The encounter, brief as it was, marked a turning point. Isabella felt a surge of self-assurance. She had faced ridicule and intimidation and had emerged with dignity intact. The small victories of the evening, polite acknowledgement from influential guests, Alexander's subtle attention, and her own successful navigation of social tension, combined to create a growing sense of empowerment. She moved through the ballroom with renewed poise, aware of the subtle admiration she was earning without needing to draw attention to herself. As the night progressed, Isabella and Alexander's paths continued to intersect, each brief conversation layering intrigue and curiosity. Their interactions, though understated, hinted at the possibility of something more, a connection that transcended the superficialities of the gala. Isabella, while remaining mindful of appearances and the judgment of others, began to recognize her own power within this world. She was not merely a modest outsider, she was an intelligent, capable, and engaging woman whose presence demanded acknowledgement, whether by the elite around her or by the man who had quietly captured her attention. By the time she stepped away from the snobbish guest and resumed her walk through the grand ballroom, Isabella felt a quiet triumph. The initial fear that had accompanied her arrival had transformed into confidence, bolstered by meaningful interactions and subtle victories. And somewhere across the room, Alexander Whitman watched, intrigued and quietly captivated, as the woman who had once inspired whispers of mockery now carried herself with elegance, intelligence, and undeniable charm. The music shifted, a gentle waltz flowing from the orchestra as the gala subtly transitioned into the evening's dance. Isabella Carter's heartbeat quickened, a mixture of anticipation and nerves settling in her chest. Guests began pairing off, gliding across the marble floors with practiced grace, while chandeliers above reflected 1,000 points of light, casting the ballroom in an ethereal glow. Isabella felt the weight of the room's attention, the same eyes that had once whispered mockery now flicking toward her, intrigued by the aura of poise she carried. It was then that Alexander Whitman approached, moving with the effortless composure that had always marked his presence. His eyes held a quiet intensity as he extended a hand, a subtle invitation that went beyond mere dance etiquette. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his tone calm yet commanding, a blend of formality and understated warmth. Isabella's pulse quickened. The gesture was more than a request, it was symbolic, a break from the social barriers she had long felt constrained by, a recognition that she belonged here, in this space, at this moment. She placed her hand lightly in his, feeling a thrill of validation and excitement. As they moved to the center of the floor, Alexander guided her with ease, his confidence complementing her grace. The world around them seemed to blur, the glittering gowns, the polished floors, the whispers of the crowd, all fading into the background as the rhythm of the music carried them. Isabella found herself moving with a fluidity she had never experienced in social settings, her nervousness giving way to exhilaration. With every turn, Alexander's admiration became subtly evident. He noted the elegance in her posture, the intelligence reflected in her attentive gaze, and the way her expressions conveyed both warmth and strength. It was a dance not just of steps and rhythm, but of recognition, an acknowledgement of Isabella's presence, her worth, and her ability to hold her own amidst the glittering sophistication of the gala. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not for superficial charm or appearance, but for the intelligence, kindness, and grace she had cultivated quietly for years. As they danced, Isabella's thoughts drifted to memories of her past, lonely evenings spent reading in quiet rooms, invitations politely declined or ignored, the sting of whispered ridicule in classrooms and offices alike. She recalled times when her efforts went unnoticed, when her ideas were dismissed, and when she had felt invisible. Now, juxtaposed against this present moment, those memories seemed distant shadows. Tonight, she was no longer overlooked. Tonight, she moved with recognition, admiration, and even a hint of awe from those around her. The murmurs of the crowd shifted as well. Where once there had been whispers of scorn or surprise, now came quiet astonishment. Observers noted the effortless chemistry between Isabella and Alexander, their steps perfectly synchronized, their mutual attention evident without ostentation. The subtle dynamic of the dance spoke volumes. It was a meeting of minds and presence, a connection that drew attention not through spectacle, but through authenticity and shared focus. Isabella felt a blush of excitement as Alexander's hand rested lightly on her back, guiding her through the turns with subtle expertise. There was a delicate tension, almost electric, in the space between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that this moment carried emotional significance beyond the ballroom itself. She realized with a mix of exhilaration and apprehension that her feelings were stirring in ways she had never anticipated. Alexander was more than a captivating figure of wealth and influence. He was attentive, perceptive, and genuinely intrigued by who she was. As the music swelled, Isabella allowed herself to surrender to the moment, the past of isolation and ridicule melting into the joy of recognition and validation. Every glance, every step, every subtle interaction deepened the sense of connection, creating an intimacy that seemed both daring and inevitable. By the time the final notes of the waltz lingered in the air, the whispers of or had fully replaced the ridicule of earlier hours, and Isabella felt a newfound confidence blooming within her. The dance ended, but the energy it created lingered. Alexander's steady gaze met hers, a silent acknowledgement of shared understanding, admiration, and the subtle beginnings of romantic tension. Isabella's heart beat with exhilaration and anticipation, knowing that this moment was more than a dance. It was the first step toward recognition, emotional connection, and the possibility of a future filled with validation, respect, and perhaps love. The soft glow of chandeliers reflected off the polished marble floor, casting a warm light over the gala's glittering attendees. Isabella Carter had just excused herself from a conversation with a group of influential guests when she felt a sharp, measured gaze on her. Turning slightly, she recognized the source immediately: Victoria Langford, a socialite known for her pointed wit and tendency to demean those she deemed beneath her. Victoria's lips curled into a calculated smile, and her eyes sparkled with a mixture of amusement and subtle disdain. "Isabella," Victoria began, her voice low and honeyed, "I must admit, I didn't expect to find you navigating this environment so confidently." The words were deliberately condescending, meant to unsettle and provoke a reaction. "Are you certain you belong here among people of refinement?" Her question was polite on the surface, yet it carried the unmistakable weight of mockery, a challenge to Isabella's newfound poise. Isabella's pulse quickened, the familiar sting of judgment rising like a tide she had learned to withstand over years of mockery. She took a steadying breath, holding her posture with calm elegance. Her response was measured, carefully chosen to convey composure rather than defensiveness. "I believe we all belong where we choose to be," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Tonight, I am here to contribute, to learn, and to engage." Her words were deliberate, conveying dignity without aggression, a subtle assertion of self-worth that left Victoria momentarily speechless. Before Victoria could recover her composure to deliver another pointed remark, Alexander Whitman appeared beside Isabella, his presence commanding yet controlled. He placed a hand lightly on her elbow, his gaze shifting to Victoria with a mixture of authority and quiet intensity. "I think Isabella's presence here is entirely appropriate," he stated evenly, his tone leaving no room for debate. "She has shown intelligence, grace, and integrity, qualities that go far beyond superficial judgments." His defense was firm yet composed, a demonstration of respect and admiration that carried the weight of someone used to influencing opinion with mere presence. Isabella felt a surge of warmth and gratitude, her eyes meeting Alexander's briefly. In that small gesture, she witnessed his courage, his willingness to stand beside her in the face of condescension, and his unequivocal recognition of her value. The protective and supportive energy he exuded created a safe space around her, affirming that she was respected not for appearances, but for her substance and character. Victoria's lips tightened, her plan to unsettle Isabella thwarted. She offered a faint, forced smile, realizing the evening had shifted against her expectations. Those who had observed the interaction glanced with subtle admiration at Isabella's composed handling of the situation, and Alexander's measured but unwavering support only amplified the impression that Isabella was not someone to be dismissed lightly. Alone for a moment, Isabella allowed her mind to reflect on the encounter. She considered the path that had brought her here, from years of underestimation, ridicule, and marginalization, to this very room where she was recognized for her intelligence and poise. She realized that her worth had never depended on approval from the elite. It had always resided within her own resilience, kindness, and intellect. Yet tonight, Alexander's admiration illuminated that truth in a tangible, undeniable way, solidifying her sense of validation. Alexander, meanwhile, observed her reaction with quiet fascination. The more he witnessed her composed handling of social scrutiny, the deeper his admiration grew. It was no longer mere curiosity. It had evolved into a genuine respect and affection for a woman who possessed both strength and grace in equal measure. Each subtle glance, each poised response, revealed a depth of character that intrigued him far beyond initial appearances. In that moment, the gala's noise, the whispering guests, and the glimmering lights faded slightly into the background. What mattered was clear. Isabella Carter was a woman of remarkable substance, and Alexander Whitman's regard for her was no longer casual interest, it was a deliberate, heartfelt recognition. The night had shifted, and with it, the unspoken connection between them deepened, laying the foundation for trust, respect, and the first whispers of affection that promised something far greater than either had anticipated. The gala had reached its peak, laughter, conversation, and clinking glasses filling the vast hall, but in the midst of it, a subtle shift occurred. Alexander Whitman, standing near the center of the ballroom, cleared his throat to gather attention. The orchestra softened, the hum of social chatter dimming as the crowd instinctively looked toward him. Isabella Carter, standing among the attendees she had once feared, felt her pulse quicken. There was a quiet tension in the air, as though the room itself sensed that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Alexander's gaze found Isabella's across the crowd, a flicker of warmth and certainty in his eyes that sent a thrill through her chest. With deliberate composure, he took a step forward and addressed the room, his voice carrying effortlessly over the softened murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, each word measured, commanding, and clear. "Tonight I am proud to introduce someone very special in my life, Isabella Carter, my wife." The words cut through the room like a striking chord, immediate and electrifying. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the soft intake of breath from those who had not expected such a declaration. Whispers cascaded across the crowd, eyes wide with shock. Laughter, which had previously accompanied whispered judgments and subtle mockery, evaporated entirely, replaced by awe and admiration. Some guests leaned forward, their expressions a mix of disbelief and intrigue, as they witnessed Alexander publicly honor a woman they had underestimated. Isabella's knees felt suddenly light, almost unsteady, yet she remained rooted to the spot, her hand instinctively brushing lightly over her chest where her heart raced with uncontainable emotion. She could hardly process the enormity of what had just occurred. The affirmation was overwhelming. After years of underestimation, ridicule, and quiet longing for recognition, she had been publicly validated and celebrated by the richest, most influential man in the room. Her breath caught between pride, disbelief, and a swell of emotion that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Guests now turned to her, many with newfound respect that replaced prior scorn. Conversations paused as murmurs of admiration rippled through the ballroom. "She is radiant," one whispered. "And Alexander's choice, brilliant," said another. The social hierarchy of the evening had subtly shifted. Charm, intelligence, and genuine character had triumphed over wealth, status, and preconceived notions. Isabella's transformation, from the modest woman who had once hesitated at the threshold of this world to the center of its admiration, was complete. Amid the awe of the crowd, Alexander stepped closer, his hand lightly touching Isabella's elbow in a gesture both intimate and protective. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice a quiet contrast to the astonished gasps and whispers around them. Isabella looked up into his eyes, seeing not only the man of wealth and influence who had captivated the room, but the person who had recognized her value, her intelligence, and her unwavering grace. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. I think so," she replied, her voice trembling with a mixture of joy and disbelief. She felt seen, truly seen, in a way she had never experienced before. The validation of his words, public, deliberate, and full of admiration, was both empowering and transformative. The crowd began to resume their activities, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. Respect and admiration flowed toward Isabella, not because of her proximity to wealth, but because of her character and the undeniable bond she shared with Alexander. In that moment, the ballroom's glittering opulence faded slightly into the background. What mattered was the authenticity and courage displayed in a single declaration that defied social expectations. Alexander leaned slightly closer, his tone soft but intimate. "You've been extraordinary tonight," he murmured, his eyes locking with hers. "And I want everyone to know exactly what I see in you." Isabella felt a flush of warmth, a blend of pride, awe, and affection that left her both breathless and grounded. Amid the whispers of astonishment and admiration, the world seemed to narrow to that single, powerful connection, the acknowledgement of value, love, and respect that transcended wealth and societal judgment. For Isabella Carter, the night had transformed from a test of courage into a defining moment of recognition and validation. And in Alexander's eyes, she saw not only admiration but a burgeoning affection that promised a shared future built on genuine connection, mutual respect, and the unshakable affirmation of who she truly was. The gala's crescendo had faded into a gentle lull, the orchestra's melodies now softer and more reflective as the evening began to wind down. Isabella Carter stood quietly near a cluster of marble columns, the grandeur of the room and the opulence of the event surrounding her like a distant, sparkling dream. She exhaled slowly, reflecting on the transformation of the night, from whispers of mockery and subtle sneers to admiration and genuine acknowledgement. The timid, anxious woman who had hesitated at the entrance had been replaced by someone who carried herself with confidence, grace, and a new understanding of her own worth. Alexander Whitman joined her, his presence calm and grounding amid the lingering hum of the gala. "You handled yourself remarkably tonight," he said softly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. His gaze was steady, filled with both admiration and warmth. "I hope you realize just how extraordinary you are." Isabella felt a flush of warmth at his words, the validation she had longed for now spoken not in whispers but with quiet conviction. They found a secluded corner near the ballroom's grand windows, where the soft glow of chandeliers reflected off the glass and the city lights beyond. Here, the crowd and the whispers of society felt distant, leaving a space where they could share a private conversation without intrusion. Isabella's chest swelled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. I never expected tonight to feel like this," she admitted, her voice gentle yet tinged with disbelief. "To be seen, really seen, it's more than I imagined." Alexander smiled, reaching out to lightly brush a strand of hair behind her ear, a subtle gesture filled with care. "You've always been remarkable," he said. "Tonight, you simply allowed others to see what I have recognized from the start. Your intelligence, your kindness, your poise, they cannot be overlooked." His words resonated deeply within Isabella, stirring emotions she had scarcely allowed herself to acknowledge. There was pride in her composure, but beneath it, a thrill of emotional intimacy and connection that left her both vulnerable and exhilarated. As they spoke, a few former mockers tentatively approached, attempting polite conversation or faint gestures of admiration. But Isabella barely registered their presence. The opinions that had once weighed so heavily on her now felt inconsequential. The laughter and sneers of the past had no power over the woman who stood here, validated not by society, but by her own courage and by Alexander's unwavering recognition. She and Alexander remained focused on each other, a quiet world of mutual respect and burgeoning affection shielding them from the surrounding crowd. Internally, Isabella marveled at the emotional journey she had experienced in a single evening. Fear had transformed into empowerment, mockery had been replaced by acknowledgement, and hesitation had given way to confidence. More than that, she recognized the subtle but profound shift within herself, the awareness that genuine love and respect could exist in a world often dominated by superficial judgment. The realization that Alexander's admiration was not fleeting or performative, but sincere and deeply felt, filled her with a sense of hope and excitement she had not dared to imagine. Alexander, observing the soft wonder in her expression, felt his own admiration deepen. There was something undeniable in the way she carried herself, a combination of humility and strength that captivated him wholly. The night's events had revealed not just a woman of remarkable character, but the beginning of a connection built on authenticity, mutual respect, and quiet emotional intimacy. For Isabella Carter, the gala had been more than a social event, it had been a turning point. She felt the first real stirrings of love, a recognition of her own value, and the joy of knowing that companionship built on trust and admiration could be hers. As she looked into Alexander's eyes, she understood that the night marked not just the end of ridicule, but the beginning of something far greater, a shared journey of respect, emotional closeness, and the subtle, thrilling promise of love. The gala had reached its final notes. The orchestra's melodies softened into a gentle cadence, signaling the end of an evening filled with laughter, admiration, and unexpected revelations. Guests began to gather their coats and handbags, exchanging polite farewells, yet the energy in the room remained charged with the memory of the night's extraordinary moments. Among the departing crowd, Alexander Whitman and Isabella Carter walked side by side, their steps synchronized in a quiet rhythm of companionship. As they moved toward the grand exit, Alexander offered his arm, and Isabella lightly rested her hand upon it. The gesture was subtle yet intimate, a reflection of the connection that had deepened through the course of the evening. Their shared smiles and occasional laughter flowed naturally, a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet joy. The conversations that had once seemed intimidating now felt distant, almost irrelevant, as they navigated the glittering hallways with a shared sense of accomplishment and mutual understanding. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the night sky, reflecting in puddles left by a light drizzle earlier in the evening. The cool night air carried a refreshing calm, contrasting with the earlier intensity of the gala. Alexander offered Isabella his hand as they stepped into the quiet street, and she took it, the warmth of his touch sending a subtle thrill through her. It was a gesture that spoke volumes without words, comfort, trust, and the gentle beginnings of something more profound than either had anticipated. As they walked, Isabella reflected on the journey of the evening. From her initial hesitation and fear of ridicule to the public acknowledgement of her worth and character, the transformation had been profound. She thought of the moments when she had been mocked, underestimated, or dismissed, and contrasted them with the validation, admiration, and respect she now received, not just from Alexander, but from the social circle that had once overlooked her. It was a rare and exhilarating sensation, to be seen and valued for who she truly was. Alexander, in turn, felt a quiet satisfaction as he observed her, elegant, poised, and radiating confidence. The evening had revealed layers of her character that he found endlessly captivating: intelligence, grace, humility, and resilience. His admiration for her had grown into something deeper, a budding affection and emotional closeness that suggested the beginning of a genuine partnership. Each glance shared, each moment of subtle laughter, and each quiet conversation strengthened the bond forming between them. Even among the departing guests, the social dynamics had shifted. Those who had initially doubted Isabella's presence now regarded her with respect, acknowledging not only her composure but also the clear connection she shared with Alexander. Conversations turned to admiration rather than judgment, and subtle whispers of approval spread through the crowd. The balance of perception had changed, genuine character and integrity had triumphed over superficial assumptions, and Isabella's quiet confidence had left a lasting impression. As they reached the car, Alexander opened the door for Isabella, a small, courteous gesture that carried an intimacy born of the evening's shared experiences. She stepped inside, and their hands brushed, an electric, fleeting touch that hinted at the romance slowly blooming between them. Words were not necessary. The shared glances, the soft smiles, and the warmth of proximity conveyed more than any conversation could. In that moment, Isabella Carter realized the full weight of the night's significance. She had arrived timid and unsure, laughed at and underestimated, yet she was leaving with recognition, respect, and the quiet promise of love. Alexander Whitman, the richest man in the room, had seen her not for her background or her modesty, but for her worth, her intelligence, and her heart. She felt a profound sense of emotional fulfillment, a rare combination of admiration, connection, and hope for the future. As the car drove into the shimmering city streets, Isabella looked at Alexander, a soft smile playing on her lips. The night had ended, but a new chapter had begun, a journey of partnership, love, and navigating the world together, confident in the knowledge that recognition and respect were no longer distant dreams, but shared realities.